Late Night Health continues with our regular segment with Dr. Paul Corona. He's a medical doctor and author of the Mind and Body trilogy, The Doctor and Patient Guide. It's a fabulous book, and you should take a look at it. I've been looking at it as we do segments each and every week, and I always learn something new. Today we're going to talk about anxiety. We've talked about stress, Dr. Paul, in the past few weeks. Is stress related to anxiety, or is there an interaction between the two?
Well, stress is a more common term that we talked about being stressed out, but it's basically it's a subtype of anxiety, really.
I mean, and there are so many different kinds of anxieties now. There's anxiety, some people get anxious leaving their house and going to a party. Other people can't leave their house because they completely fall apart. Other people don't want to be in crowds, and if they are, they get very anxious. Their blood pressure goes up. Are these all related in one way or another?
Yeah, and like we talked about before, I think stress and anxiety, some of it's good. I mean, it's really there to protect us and to keep us safe from harm, and we need
the fight or flight syndrome.
Right, exactly, and that's there to protect us. Where the problem becomes is when the anxiety gets to the point where it starts interfering with our lives, and when it interferes with people's lives and the quality of life. And you mentioned some of the major types of anxiety. There's we call generalized anxiety, which is people who are anxious most of the time. A very common one is social anxiety. Like you said, being afraid of meeting with people, going to a party, going out somewhere, that's very, very common. And even fear of leaving the house, we call that agoraphobia. There's post-traumatic stress, from people from the military or from a very stressful event. So there's several different types of anxiety out there.
With anxiety, is it growing in our society? I mean, with all the things that we have to do, we have to work, we have family, we have to make money, we got to catch up on the new movies that are coming out. I mean, there's so many different things. I know people who get very anxious if they can't go to things like Comic-Con, which to me seems a little silly, but they go nuts if they can't get in.
Right. And then I think in our digital world and so much information, I think anxiety is definitely increasing. I've seen over my practice, I think it's increasing. Why? Because our modern life, and I think a lot of it's our financial situation is not good in this country, and I think that the job situation isn't good. And people, aren't making as much as they used to. They're paying more in taxes, et cetera. So I think that's causing a lot of stress. It's just our financial situation.
I know that in the 60s, it was very common for housewives to be diagnosed as anxious, and they would be given Valium. And a lot of times they were addicted to Valium.
Right.
Have the medications changed and improved, one? And two, do we still have the housewife syndrome of everybody's a little anxious, so this will just take the edge off?
Yeah, and we do use, we call benzodiazepine, which is the class of Valium and Xanax and Klonopin and Ativan. They're used. We try to minimize them. They are addictive. There's no question. And the other problem is when people take them for even mild anxiety, and some people they just can't handle even slight anxiety. Really, those are meant for people who have panic attacks, who have severe anxiety that keeps them from functioning. And that's really the only good reason to take it. But some people just take it when they feel a little bit stressed out, when really they should probably go take a walk. They should do something active. They should do some yoga, some meditation. There's a lot of ways that beyond medication that can help people relax.
And of course, a combination of the two.
Right, exactly.
Right. In Healing the Mind and Body, the Doctor and Patient Guide, I believe it's chapter 4, and I did find my copy. I'm sorry, Daryl, I did bump my microphone with the book. In chapter 4, you discuss in depth anxiety. We've talked about the different levels. Does everybody get anxious once in a while, first of all?
Yes, and anxiety, and everybody has stress and anxiety in our lives. There's not one person I know who doesn't. Some people have more than others, and then some people handle it better than others. But yes, anxiety is a normal part of a human life, and some people get depressed occasionally, and that's just part of being a human.
Is depression super anxiety, or are they different?
They're different in their symptoms, but they're very highly related because most people who are depressed have a problem with anxiety, and most people who have anxiety disorder or have problem with depression. But they're separate entities, but they're so entwined. They're so commonly presented together.
So I can be anxious, have anxiety, and still be depressed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
Right. And you said that some people can handle it. I mean, there's an old saying that I'm trying to think of exactly how it goes. God gives us only as much as we can handle.
Right.
So some people can handle, this much, and other people can only handle that much. Is that
true? And then some people thrive on stress. Some people say that they perform better when they're under stress. But you're right. Some people have better, we call coping skills. Some people can just cope better with stress, and they've learned in coping skills they can learn through counseling, and then especially using tools like breathing exercises, meditation, yoga kind of practices. Some people can learn how to cope with stress.
Coping would seem to me to be the better way of approaching anxiety. Learning, anxiety reducing techniques, walking, exercising, things like that.
Absolutely. And and medications, for people with established anxiety disorders, which I see a lot of, medications, not just the benzos like the Valium class, but other medications that I use are very effective for reducing anxiety, especially some of the antidepressants that are out there that I work with. They work very, very well for anxiety disorders.
As we've talked over the last couple of months, all of the situations that you treat seem to be chemical or hormonal imbalances. Is anxiety, or can anxiety be a hormonal displacement?
Yes, and they're the main thing is they're the chemical imbalances in the nervous system. But that's basically the hormonal imbalances tie in right in with chemical imbalances. This is why when hormones change, when hormone imbalances changes, people are more prone to stress and more prone to depression.
And this is why you don't like that first class of drugs as much as you like some of the newer ones.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. The other ones, like the Valium class, we try to sparingly use them because of the fact that they are addictive. And we don't want people to rely on those only. What I try to do is get to the core of the problem. If they need counseling, I try to send them to counseling. But what I try to do is get the chemical imbalance fixed, and then the anxiety gets so much better. And then also really work with people on their lifestyle, because exercise is really important for people with anxiety disorders.
So when are you and I going for our walk? Our guest is Dr. Paul Corona, MD. His trilogy, Healing the Mind and Body, is something that every patient and every doctor should have on their bookshelf for reference. And we talk each and every week about different things. I think we're going to talk about something totally different next week, and that will be insurance, and how insurance has changed since Dr. Paul has been in practice, and we'll be doing that next week here on Late Night Health. We'll also next week be talking about smokeless tobacco, the vape tobaccos, and we'll be talking with a representative of the vape industry, Mark D. Burton. He's been on the show a couple of times. We'll be talking with Mark again next week because there's been a lot of controversy about vape smoking. And the fact that there are drugs in the vapor, including nicotine, which can be harmful if overused or not used in the correct in the correct way. You can find out more about Dr. Paul Corona, by the way, by joining us at latenighthealth.com. There'll be a pretty picture of Dr. Paul. There is on our homepage. It's pretty, Paul. It's pretty. And there's also some information and some background information on the website regarding Dr. Paul as well. One of the biggest fears Americans have is public speaking, something I personally don't relate to. However, people are afraid of it. It's like the number one fear. It's not death. It's not taxes. It's, oh my gosh, I have to give a speech in front of 20 people or 100 people or whatever. Are there coping mechanisms other than drugs for something like that, or would drugs be the way to go?
Well, it depends on how acute the situation is. Because when I first started doing speaking and speaking for companies, I was pretty afraid too. And I listened to a couple tapes about public speaking, and that seemed to help. But yeah, you're right. It is statistically the number one fear. I think people getting in front of a crowd, being exposed, afraid of what's going to happen, afraid of the questions they're going to get. But yeah, for me, I personally felt that the first time I did a major talk in front of a bunch of doctors, but for me, I think the more I did it, the more comfortable I got with doing it.
It's almost like baptism by fire.
Right.
Right? Because it's something, if you keep doing it, you should get better at it. And at the same time, you shouldn't be as anxious about it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it just takes practice.
It takes practice. But even just leaving the house takes practice if you're anxious about leaving your home or driving a car. Interesting. A lot of young women in 16, 17 are anxious about driving. Boys not so much, but girls tend to put off getting their driver's license longer than boys. I don't know why that is, but is there some anxiety in that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think anxiety is just basically facing the unknown. And I think being in the car is highly anxious, especially if someone's had been in accidents. But, also being in enclosed spaces, not being able to move. So that's why being in a situation where, like an elevator or a car can be very stressful for some people.
I hadn't thought about that. Going up in an elevator has never bothered me. Or going down or up an escalator. These are other things that can trigger anxiety.
Right.
Well, our guest is the author of Healing the Mind and Body, the trilogy, The Doctor and Patient Guide, Dr. Paul D. Corona. Dr. Corona, your website, by the way, is?
It's www.dr, for doctor, so drpaulcoronamd.com. drpaulcoronamd.com. Well, Dr. Paul and I will be back as Late Night Health continues. Join us at latenighthealth.com and like us at facebook.com/latenighthealth.